Okay, so this is Daf 6 of Avodah Zarah, foreign worship, and we just ended with a treifa, so an animal that has some sort of wound or blemish that would cause it to be expected to be dead within 12 months, within the year. So it says, but according to one who says that a treifa can give birth, what can be said? According to this opinion, a treifa cannot be excluded by the phrase, quote, to keep seed alive. The Gemara answers, the verse states with regard to the animals that were brought by Noah into the ark, quote, you shall bring into the ark to keep them alive with you. Genesis 6:19. The term with you indicates that the verse is stated with regard to animals that are similar to you, but not a treifa. The Gemara asks, but perhaps Noah himself was a treifa. If so, one cannot exclude a treifa from the comparison of animals to Noah. The Gemara answers, it is written about Noah that he was complete. Genesis 6:9. The Gemara challenges, but perhaps the verse means that his ways were complete, but it is not referring to Noah's physical attributes. The Gemara explains, it is already written about him that he was righteous, Genesis 6:9, which means that his actions were perfect. Consequently, when the verse says that he was complete, it is referring to his body. The Gemara challenges, but perhaps the verse means that Noah was complete in his manner, that is, and he was righteous in his good deeds. Accordingly, the verse could not exclude the possibility that Noah himself was a treifa. The Gemara explains, it cannot enter your mind that Noah himself was a treifa. As if it enters your mind that Noah was a treifa, would the merciful one have said to him, bring in treifot like you into the ark, but do not bring in whole and perfect animals. Okay, the Gemara asks, and now that it has been established that one derives the disqualification of a treifa from the term with you, why do I need the phrase to keep seed alive? The Gemara answers, if one could learn only from with you, I would say that Noah brought the animals to the ark only for the purpose of company, and therefore even an animal that is elderly and even one who is castrated can come into the ark, provided that it is not a treifa. Therefore the merciful one writes to keep seed alive, teaching that only animals that could bear offspring may be brought into the ark. A dilemma was raised before the sages. When the Mishnah teaches that it is prohibited to conduct business with Gentiles on the 3 days before their festival, do the 3 days include them, meaning the days preceding the festival, in their festival itself? In which case the prohibition applies only to the festival and to the 2 preceding days. Or perhaps it is referring to them without their festival. That is, the prohibition applies to 3 full days before the festival. The Gemara suggests a proof from a Mishnah in 7b. Tashema, come and hear, as Rabbi Yishmael says, on the 3 days before the festivals of Gentiles and in the 3 days after them, these actions are prohibited. The Gemara analyzes this statement. If it enters your mind that the 3 days include them and their festival, this would mean that Rabbi Yishmael counts the day of their festival twice, as he counts it initially as part of the first set of 3 days, and he also counts it at the end, along with the second set of 3 days. Clearly, the 3 days do not include the day of the festival itself. The Gemara rejects this proof. It is possible that the festival is counted as one of the initial 3 days. That is, 3 days include them and their festival, and is not counted as part of the 3 days following the festival. But since Rabbi Yishmael taught that these actions are prohibited during the 3 days before them, he also used the same expression and taught that these actions are prohibited during the 3 days after them. Although what he is actually teaching is that these actions are prohibited only during the 2 days after it. So it's interesting because if it's 3 days before and 3 days after, and then you have your holiday, there's 7 days in a week, so you wouldn't be doing business with a Gentile. And I think that was the point of his opinion. But anyway, the Gemara answers, come and hear a proof from that which Rav Tachlifa bar Avdimi says, that Shmuel says, according to the statement of Rabbi Yishmael, it is always prohibited to engage in business with Christians, as their festival takes place every Sunday. So since 3 days preceding and following their festival are included in the prohibition, one cannot engage in business with them any day of the week, right? And if it enters your mind, and the word there is not Christians, it's Notzrim. So it's interpreted that that's Christians, so they translated it that way. Okay. If it enters your mind that the 3 days of the Mishnah include them and their festival, that is only 2 days preceding and the following festival are included in the prohibition, then according to Rabbi Yishmael, there are still Wednesday and Thursday on which it is permitted to engage in business with Christians, or Notzrim. The Gemara clarifies, according to the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael, I have no dilemma, as it is clear that the 3 days mentioned in the Mishnah are them without their festival. When I raise the dilemma, it is according to the opinion of the rabbis, meaning the majority. What days are included in the prohibition according to their opinion? Ravina says, Tashema, come and hear a proof from the continuation of the Mishnah 8a. And these are the festivals of Gentiles: Kalanda, Satrunya or Saturnalia, and Karatesim or Kratesis. I don't know these. But it's interesting, the word Kalanda, it looks like the word calendar. But anyway, Rav Hanin Barava says in explanation of that Mishnah, when do these festivals occur? Kalanda is held during the 8 days after the winter solstice. And Saturnalia, or Satrunya, is held during the 8 days before the winter solstice. And your mnemonic to remember which festival is which is that the festival that occurs after the solstice is mentioned first, and the festival that takes place before it is mentioned later, as in the verse, quote, you have hemmed me in behind and before. Psalms 139 verse 5, where the word before appears after the term behind. Ravina explains the proof. If it enters your mind that the Tana of the Mishnah counts them in their festival, in this case, there are 10 days that are included in the prohibition, the 8 days of the festival and the 2 days beforehand, why then would the Mishnah say that the prohibition applies only for 3 days? If the 3 days do not include the festivals themselves, then this difficulty does not apply, as although in practice the prohibition lasts for 11 days, the Mishnah is not referring to the period of the festival. The Gemara responds, this proof is inconclusive, as the Tana counts all of the festival of Kalanda as 1 day. Rav Ashi says, Tashema, come and hear a proof from the Mishnah, which specifies that the time that the actions are prohibited is on the 3 days before the festivals of the Gentiles. And if it enters your mind that the Mishnah is referring to them and their festival, let it teach at the time of the festivals of Gentiles, it is prohibited to engage in business with them for 3 days. The wording of the Mishnah indicates that all 3 days are before the festival. And if you would say, that which is taught in Mishnah before the festivals of the Gentiles serves to exclude the days following their festivals. That is, the Tana is clearly indicating that the prohibition applies before rather than afterward. Let the Mishnah teach. At the time of the festivals of Gentiles, it is prohibited to engage in business with them for 3 days beforehand. Rather, conclude from the wording employed that when the Mishnah states the 3 days before the festivals, it is referring to them without their festival. The Gemara affirms, conclude from here that this is the case. A dilemma was raised before the sages. Is the reason for the prohibition against conducting business with Gentiles in the days preceding their festivals because Gentiles might profit, which will bring him joy, and he will subsequently give thanks to his idol on his festival? Or perhaps it is because this is a violation of the prohibition, quote, and you shall not put a stumbling block before the blind, Leviticus 19, verse 14, as one who sells an animal to a Gentile thereby aids him in engaging in prohibited idol worship. The Gemara explains, what is the practical difference between the two opinions? The practical difference is in a situation where the Gentile already has an animal of his own. If you say that the reason for the prohibition is because he might profit, here too the Jew causes him to profit. But if you say that the reason for the prohibition is due to the prohibition, quote, you shall not put a stumbling block before the blind, since the Gentile has his own animal, the Jew is not helping him sin. The Gemara challenges, and even if he already has his own animal, does not one who assists him transgress due to the command, quote, you shall not put a stumbling block before the blind? But isn't it taught in a Braita that Rabbi Natan said, from where is it derived that a person may not extend a cup of wine to a Nazirite who is prohibited from drinking wine, and that he might not extend a limb severed from a living animal to descendants of Noah? The verse states, "And you shall not put a stumbling block before the blind," Leviticus 19, verse 14. But here, in both cases, if one does not give it to him, he can take it himself, and yet one who provides it to him transgresses due to the prohibition, quote, "You shall not put a stumbling block before the blind." The Gemara answers, here we are dealing with the case where they are standing on the two sides of a river, and therefore the recipient could not have taken it himself. Since his help was instrumental, the one who conveyed the item has violated the prohibition of putting a stumbling block before the blind. The Gemara adds, the language of the Braita is also precise. As it teaches, a person may not extend, and it does not teach, one may not give. Learn from the usage of the term extend that the Braita is referring to one located on one side of a river who extends the item to the other side. A dilemma was raised before the sages. If one ignored the injunction of the Mishnah and engaged in business with Gentiles before their festival, what is the status of the profit that he earned? Rabbi Yochanan says if he engaged in business, it is prohibited to derive benefit from his profits. Reish Lakish says if he engaged in business, it is permitted to derive benefit from his profits. Rabbi Yochanan raised an objection to Reish Lakish from a Braita. With regard to the festivals of Gentiles, if one engaged in business, these profits are prohibited. What is it not referring to one who engages in business with Gentiles before their festivals? Reish Lakish responded, no, the Braita is referring to business conducted specifically during their festivals. There are those who say that there is a different version of the above exchange. So Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish raised an objection to Rabbi Yochanan from a Braita. With regard to the festivals of Gentiles, if one engaged in business, these profits are prohibited. Isn't it correct to infer from the Braita that if the business occurred during their festivals, yes, deriving benefit from the profits is prohibited. But if it took place before their festivals, no, it is not prohibited. Rabbi Yochanan responded, no, the Tana calls both this, the days before the festival, and that, the festival itself, their festivals. The Gemara notes that it is taught in Braita in accordance with the opinion of Reish Lakish. When the sages said that it is prohibited to engage with Gentiles in business, they prohibited it only in the case of an item that endures. But with regard to an item that does not endure, it is not prohibited. And even with regard to an item that endures, if one did engage in business with Gentiles, deriving benefit from the profits is permitted. So, Rav Zivid taught a Braita from the school of Rabbi Oshaya. With regard to an item that does not endure, one may sell it to them, but one may not bury it from them. The Gemara relates, there was an incident involving a certain heretic who sent a Caesarean dinar to Rabbi Yehuda Nasiah on the day of the heretic's festival. Rabbi Yehuda Nasiah said to Reish Lakish, who was sitting before him, what shall I do? If I take the dinar, he will go and thank his idol for the success of his endeavor. But if I do not take the dinar, he will harbor enmity toward me. Reish Lakish said to him, take it and throw it into a pit in the presence of the heretic. Rabbi Yehuda Nasiah said, all the more so, this will cause him to harbor enmity toward me. Reish Lakish explained, I said, that is, I meant that you should throw it in an unusual manner so that it looks as though the dinar inadvertently fell from your hand into the pit. Okay, the Mishnah teaches that it is prohibited to lend them items and to borrow items from them during the 3 days preceding their festivals. The Gemara asks, granted, it is prohibited to lend them items to them as this causes them to have a profit, but why is it prohibited to borrow the items from them during this period? Doesn't this serve to reduce for them the property they possess during the festival? Abaye said, the sages issued a decree that it is prohibited to borrow the items from them due to the concern that he might come to lend the items to them. So Rava said all of it, lending and borrowing, is prohibited for the same reason, as in either situation the Gentile might go and have thanks to his idol, as we will be pleased that the Jew was forced to borrow items from him. The Mishnah further teaches that it is prohibited to lend money to them or to borrow money from them. The Gemara asked, granted, it is prohibited to lend money to them as this causes them to have a profit. But what if one wants to borrow money from them? Why is it prohibited? Abaye said, the sages issued a decree that it is prohibited to borrow money from them due to the concern that he might come to lend money to them. So Rava said all of it, lending and borrowing, is prohibited for the same reason. As in either situation, the Gentile will go and give thanks to his object of idol worship. The Mishnah also teaches that it is prohibited to repay debts owed to them and to collect payment of their debts. Once again, the Gemara asks, granted, it is prohibited to repay debts owed to them, as giving them the money at this time causes them to have a profit. Why is it prohibited to collect payment of their debts? Doesn't this serve to reduce their fortune? Abaye said the sages issued a decree that is prohibited to collect debts from them, and due to the concern that he might come to repay their debts. Rava said all of it, repaying and collecting debts, is prohibited for the same reason. As in either situation, the Gentile might go and give thanks to his idol for having had sufficient funds to pay his debts. The Gemara notes, all of the prohibitions listed in the Mishnah are necessary, as if the Mishnah had taught only that it is prohibited, as if the Mishnah had taught only that it is prohibited to engage with them in business. One could have said that the reason for the prohibition is because it causes the Gentile to have a profit, and we would go and give thanks to his idol. But with regard to borrowing items from them, which serves to reduce them for them the property they possess during the festival, one may well do so. And if the Mishnah had further taught only that it is prohibited to borrow items from them, one might have thought that it is because the matter is significant to the Gentile, as he is pleased that the Jew is forced to borrow items from him, and therefore he might go and give thanks. But it might have been supposed that to borrow money from them is permitted, as there is only distress for the Gentile when he lends money, as he would say, my money will not return to me again, since the borrower may never repay the loan. And if the Mishnah had taught, in addition, only that it is prohibited to borrow money from them, one might have thought that this is because the Gentile knows, I will forcibly collect payment from the Jew against his will by means of the promissory note. And now, in any case, he will go and give thanks to the Jew, give thanks that the Jew is forced to borrow money from him. But with regard to collecting payment from them, as this money will never return to him again, one might say that he has distress about paying back the debt, and he will not go and give thanks. Since one might have reached these conclusions, it is necessary for the Mishnah to state each rule explicitly. The Mishnah teaches that Rabbi Yehuda says one might collect the repayment of debts from them because this causes the Gentile distress. The Gemara asks, and doesn't Rabbi Yehuda accept the principle that even though he is distressed now, he will be happy afterward? But isn't it taught in a Braita? Rabbi Yehuda says, a woman may not apply lime to her skin during the intermediate days of the festival in order to remove bodily hair and soften her skin, because this temporarily disqualifies her until the lime is removed. And Rabbi Yehuda concedes, with regard to lime, that she can peel off during the intermediate days of the festival, that she may apply it on the intermediate days of the festival, as though she is distressed now, as the lime renders her unattractive, she will be happy afterward. When the lime is removed and she becomes more attractive, it is evident from this Braita that Rabbi Yehuda does take into account the joy that will be experienced at the end time with regard to permitting an action now. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says in response, leave aside the halachot of the intermediate days of the festival. These cannot be compared to other cases, as with regard to the labors permitted on a festival, this is the reason for the leniency. Although he is distressed by performing them now, as they involve effort and trouble, he will be happy afterward of the festival in itself, that he has performed them, when he enjoys the benefits of labor he has performed. Due to the joy they will bring him on the festival, these labors are prohibited. Ravina said that there is a different answer. Rabbi Yehuda maintains that with regard to repaying a debt, a Gentile is always distressed, even after the fact. But in general, Rabbi Yehuda does not take into account the joy that will be experienced at a later time. The Gemara notes, the Mishnah is not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha, as it states that one may not collect payment from a Gentile during the 3 days preceding their festival without differentiating between the various cases. as it is taught in a Baraita. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha says, in the case of a loan with a promissory note, one may not collect payment from the Gentiles before their festivals, as one can demand repayment of the debt by presenting the promissory note in his possession at a later stage. By contrast, in the case of a loan by oral agreement, one may collect payment from them because he is considered as one who salvages money from them, since he has no promissory note and cannot be sure that the Gentile will repay the loan at another time. The Gemara relates, Rav Yosef sat behind Rabbi Abba in the study hall, and Rabbi Abba sat before Rav Huna as a student before his teacher. And Rav Huna sat and said the following statements. The halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha, and the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. The Gemara explains, as for the statement that the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha, this is referring to that which he said with regard to collecting a loan by oral agreement from Gentiles during the days preceding their festivals. As for the statement that the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, this is as it is taught in the Mishnah, Bava Kama 100b, in the case of one who gives wool to a dyer to dye it red for him, and instead he dyed it black, or one who gives wool to a dryer to dye it black and instead he dyed it red. And that is the end of Daf 6. Thanks for watching.